Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, salawat. Assalamu alaikum everyone. Thank you for joining us today on Janazah Journey, the program organized by Jaffari Islamic Youth in collaboration with Jaffari Funeral Services Committee. Before we get started, I'll request Brother Muslim Hassan to please grace us with the recitation of the Holy Quran to start off our event. Can you please get another loud salawat?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والضحى والليل إذا سجى ما ودعك ربك وما قلى وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى ولسوف يعطيك ربك فترضى ألم يجدك يتيما فعاوى ووجدك ضالا فهدى ووجدك عائلا فأغنى فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر وأما السائل فلا تنهر وأما بنعمة ربك فحدث صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Thank you for that beautiful recitation, Muslim. Can you get one more loud salawat, please? As we begin the program, I'll have you note a couple things. We do have chai and water available on the tables on either side. Please feel free to grab them throughout the program. A couple of housekeeping items. Men, the washrooms are off to my left here, right through those doors. Ladies, I'll request you please go through the door in the back and round to the washrooms on the back side in Zainabia B. Although it is a very morbid topic of today, it is one of great importance and one that we must all educate ourselves on. And we thank Jaffari Funeral Services immensely for facilitating today's presentation and demonstration of Janazah Journey. I humbly invite Brother Kazim Kanani to please come forward and continue with the program and the presentation. Can we get a loud salawat?
Thank you, Brother Shabir. I begin in the name of Allah, who is the most kind, the most glorious, the most magnificent, the most beneficent, and the most merciful. I begin by seeking refuge from the Almighty from Shaitan, and seek refuge through the intercession of our 12 Imams, including our most living Imam, Imam Mehdi, Ajanallahu Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif. I begin with the greatest of salutations to his last and final messenger, Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. And his progeny, who amongst many of their teachings have taught us about life, about death, and about compassion. May the blessings of our holy prophet and his progeny be showered upon all of us this afternoon. I begin by extending my heartfelt thanks and kudos to the Jaffari Islamic Youth and its leadership for organizing today's seminar and for bringing us all together to plan for the hereafter. At this time, I would like to ask that both on the ladies and the gents side that the JIY leadership stand to be acknowledged, please. And if we can please give them a loud salawat. It is with great privilege that I stand before you on behalf of Jaffari Funeral Services today. Death in Islam is absolutely certain. In a stark contrast, birth is not certain, for a baby can die in a mother's womb. We, myself included, make preparations of all stages of our life, a life whose duration is most definitely uncertain. Growing up, we plan our future, we plan our studies, we plan to take the right courses, get into the right programs. We study and we prepare for our exams and eventually plan for our careers. We plan to get married, plan to have children, plan for an RESP account, plan for an RRSP account. However, we continually plan for the duration which is uncertain, but we are negligent about death whose duration is most permanent and certain. Amirul Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam reminds us in one of his sayings where he says, "O people, this world is a passage, while the hereafter is the permanent abode. So take from this passage all that you can for the permanent abode. Tear away from your hearts the dunya and the love for the material things before your bodies are torn away from it." Our Holy Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam has also said, "You have not been created to perish, but to remain forever. You will be transferred from one abode to another when you die." Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us in the Holy Quran and reminds us over 145 different times about death in various forms by using the word maut or a derivative of it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Ankabut, Surah 29, verse 57, He says, "Kullu nafsin dha'ikatil maut, thumma ilayna turja'un." Every soul shall taste death, and then to Allah he shall return. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the words kullu nafsin dha'ikatil maut in the Holy Quran 3 times, each time reminding us of something else connected to death. You will note that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't say that some will taste death, or some may taste death, or that only the elderly or only the sick will taste death. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Holy Quran says that every soul shall taste death, and therefore He also reminds us in Surah Baqarah where He says, الَّذِينَ إِذَا أَصْحَابَتْهُمْ مُصِيبَةٌ قَالُوا إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. Anytime we receive the news of death, we recite what? We recite إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. Not only because of what is stated in Surah Baqarah, but also to give the grieving person some peace. By doing what? By reminding them that this is what we have come from, and it is to Him that we shall inshallah return. Given that we have just finished the month of Muharram, and we are in the month of Safar where we mourn the martyrdom of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, it is fitting that I share a short passage from his address that he made to his companions on the day of Ashura. On the day of Ashura, he said what? He said, "Death is nothing but a bridge over which you pass from this world of distress and affliction towards a vast heaven of eternal bliss. Who amongst you would not like to migrate from the prison to the palace? And as regards to our enemies, for them it is like migrating from the palace towards the prison." And it is with that, my brothers and sisters, this afternoon, inshallah, we will attempt to prepare ourselves for death. So much so in terms of what to do when someone passes away. Death, as we had said, is inevitable. Whether it is going to be our grandparents or our parents, our siblings, or a loved one, we should be prepared in terms of what to do and what not to do. This afternoon, inshallah, we will cover off a host of topics, including an introduction to Jaffari Funeral Services, including the services, the team that's there and the services that this team is going to provide, as well as how to care for a deceased, the process and the procedures, member benefits of being a member of the ISIJ, as well as a live ghusl and kafan demonstration, and then we will end off, inshallah, talking about Salatul Mayat and the talqeen that is recited at burial. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to the Jaffari Funeral Services team. The team in itself is led by our Honorable Mukhi, Mehboob Bhai Siuji, as well as our chair lady, Zehra Bai Dilawar. The team is then supported and led by Chair of Jaffari Funeral Services, Mubarak Bhai Mamdani, Vice Chair Muhammad Taqi Bhai Sabur, and myself as the Secretariat. And then on the ladies' side, we have Sister Sajida Bhai Habib, who is the ladies' Ghusl Kafan lead, as well as Nusrat Bhai Davdani, who is the assistant lead. This team of volunteers, of the leadership team, is supported by a team of volunteers. A team of 40 male and 40 female volunteers who provide all of the necessary services in the event of death. Today's seminar, by the way, is not intended to recruit new members by any means. However, should anybody be interested in joining or providing such services, we ask that you reach out to any of us on either the ladies or the gents side, and we will definitely take your names down. We fully understand that today's youth, having been there, are busy preparing for their careers and eventually their lives and getting set. Death occurs at the snap of a finger, and therefore, everyone may not necessarily be available. And therefore, again, I say today's seminar is not about recruiting, but more so about information. So what are the services that we provide as Jaffari Funeral Services? The 40 male and female volunteers combined provide services that include assembling our own caskets, which you will have the privilege of seeing later today. Transportation of the deceased from the place of death here to the JCC and then to the final resting place. Ghusl and Kafan, burial services, all the regulatory filings and obtaining the necessary permits. We make all of the final arrangements that are required. And finally, our team also is very much so involved in providing education, training, and guidance such as today's session. We not only provide training and guidance locally to the Toronto community, we also provide these services across Canada and into the United States as well. I'd like to now move on to talk about caring for the deceased. Caring for the deceased when they pass away is something very important. When we do so, one of the first things that we should do when someone passes away is try to remove all of their personal belongings. Any rings that they may be wearing, earrings, necklaces, bracelets, and so on. The other thing to try to remove, if it's an elderly who has dentures, is to try to remove the dentures if they are easily removable. If they are not, you leave them as is. If possible, you will gently turn the mayat or the deceased so that the feet are facing the direction of the Qibla. And you will ensure that the hands and legs of the mayat are straightened as best as possible. The hands and legs of the mayat, or the hands specifically, should never be crossed. If the deceased passes away in a hospital setting, a hospital is generally inclined, or their staff is generally inclined to cross the arms. However, most hospitals nowadays understand that when it's a Muslim death, that they should try to keep the arms as straight as possible. If not, we should be, as the next of kin or the family that's there, should take it upon them to inform the healthcare facility to let them know that the arms and legs should be as straight as possible. Of course, if it's an elderly person and their arms or their legs are naturally bent, there is no need to try to straighten those out. You leave them as is. You will ensure that the eyes and the mouth of the deceased are closed as best as possible. In order to close the eyes of a deceased, other than using your fingers or your thumb to close them, you will place turba on their eyes to help assist in the process of keeping the eyelids shut. When it comes to the closing of the mouth, the easiest way to do this is to take a towel or a pillowcase, for example, and tie it around their head so that their jaw is being held nice and close and nice and tight as best as possible. Again, when you are performing this or when you are doing this, you want to ensure that you are not causing any unnecessary pain to the deceased. And finally, one of the things that you will also do, which is highly recommended, is to cover the mayat with a cloth, preferably a plain cloth, but any cloth will do, and you will cover the mayat from head to toe. And finally, you will ensure that wherever the mayat is, that room is a well-lit room as best as possible. Yes, outside of all of these things, you can have the Quran playing, highly recommended. You can have people reciting the Holy Quran. But in terms of caring for the deceased itself, these are the bare minimum things, or I should say the things that should be or must be done. We'll now move on to the process and the procedures that we have here at the ISIJ of Toronto. First and foremost, in the event that a death occurs, the next of kin, and preferably it should be the next of kin and not anyone else, should make the initial notification to the Jamaat. In order to make this notification, the person that you would be calling or contacting is the Mukhi, and the phone number is at 1855 Jaffari. You can reach the Mukhi at any given time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, regardless of what time of day it is or what time of night it is. He will answer the phone, or the phone will be forwarded to the next available person. Once that notification is made, the Mukhi will ask for certain pieces of information. He will start off by asking for the name of the deceased, the full name with correct spelling, which should be the deceased's legal name. The second thing that the Mukhi will be asking for is the location of the deceased. Where has this person passed away? Have they passed away at home, or a hospital, or a nursing home? Or has this turned into a coroner case for whatever reason, where the authorities are taking charge and control of the body in itself? When this is, he asks this not to be nosy and to try to pry into someone's life, but to allow us to prepare accordingly for what we have to do in executing the roles and responsibilities at Jaffari Funeral Services. The Mukhi will also be seeking the contact information for the next of kin, and will also ask for confirmation that the next of kin, in fact, has the permission to make the necessary arrangements and to act on behalf of the deceased. And finally, the Mukhi will ask, has the death been pronounced? Has the death been certified either by a doctor or by a coroner? This allows us to prepare accordingly. If we know that the death has been certified, we are able to move efficiently and mobilize the team of volunteers, be it on the ladies or the gents side, to be able to come and pick up the janazah, to come and prepare for ghusl and kafan and the rest of the formalities. Once the Mukhi has all of this information, what he will turn around and do is transfer everything over to Jaffari Funeral Services. When he transfers everything over to Jaffari Funeral Services, you will receive a phone call from the chair or the chair's designate. The chair or the chair designate will ask you what type of death this was. Was this a death of natural causes? If so, what was it? Was it something like COVID-19, where we need to take additional precautions? Or was it a natural death? He will ask if the deceased has a kafan of their own and where that kafan is, and will remind the next of kin to make sure to bring that here to JCC. The chair or designate will also ask who will assist with ghusl and kafan. We allow for a maximum of 3 family members to take part, and so he will ask you who these 3 people are and will ask for their names, and may even ask in terms of what their level or skill set or level of comfort is in performing these acts. He will also ask if anyone will be staying with the deceased overnight here at JCC. And again, it is highly recommended that someone stay with the deceased overnight, and we have allowed for the provisions to do so, and we allow for up to 3 family members to stay overnight. One of the things that we always do is we recommend to the family that 3 people do not take the burden on themselves of staying all night. One of the things we suggest is that you do this in shifts, because the next day, the day of burial, is going to be a long day, which will arguably begin around 9, 10 in the morning and end around 5 or 6 in the evening. And therefore, it's important that people are well rested to be able to handle what's to come in the following day. And finally, one of the other questions that will be asked is where the deceased wishes to be laid to rest. And this is a conversation, my brothers and sisters, that we should all be having amongst our families, so we know where our loved ones want to be buried. Here at the ISIJ, we are blessed to have 5 cemeteries where we could bury our loved ones, and I'll talk about that momentarily. But it's important that we all understand where, our parents or our grandparents wish to be buried. So when that time comes, we're not scrambling to find a will or a piece of paper that says, hey, this is where I want to be buried. We have that information and that knowledge, so we can expeditiously make those preparations. When you arrive to the JCC, when you arrive here to the center and the deceased has arrived, one of the things that we are going to do is work with you to fill out the regulatory paperwork. In doing so, one of the forms that we have to fill out is a form referred to as Form 15, the Statement of Death. Majority of it is completed by us because we have the Form 15, we have Form 16, which is generally a death certificate, so we're able to do so. However, we do ask the next of kin for specific pieces of information. These pieces of information include but are not limited to the marhum or the deceased's social insurance number, their date of birth, their place of birth, city and province, how old they were at their time of death, the name of the physician or coroner, which we would take off of the death certificate itself, the marital relationship status of that deceased. We're not asking this again because we want to be nosy. It's actually a line item in the form where we have to state, is the person married or widowed or separated and so on. We'll ask for the occupation or profession that they held for most of their working life, what their usual place of address is, their parents' names, as well as their parents' places of birth. And this is information that is requested on Form 15 from the province for statistical purposes, and also for information verification should it ever get to that point. But this is all the information that we will require and we will ask of you when you arrive here at the center. Now, just so everyone knows, Form 15 is actually available on the Jamaat website under funeral services. So if you ever wanted to be proactive and keep Form 15 completed with your kafan, that is something that you are absolutely able to do as well. So it eases the burden on the next of kin as well as the funeral services team when it comes to completing this information. So the entire process and procedure in a timeline will start with the call to the muki, transportation of the deceased here to the center, arrival of the family, completion of all the formalities, ghusl and kafan, salatul mayyat, transportation to the cemetery of choice, the burial, and then following that, the siako or karimani or niyaz service that takes place here at JCC. This entire process can take as little as 5 hours or as long as a couple of days, depending on the situation and the circumstance. We, alhamdulillah, have been able to perform all of this in a 5-hour window, and sometimes, we understand that the next of kin may not necessarily be available or be in the country, for example, or that we are waiting on key members of the family to arrive, and therefore we will wait, and we will wait for a couple of days or up to a couple of days to allow for the family members to arrive. However, it is highly recommended that burial take place as soon as reasonably possible. So if we are waiting on family members to arrive, there is absolutely no issue with that. But know that we try not to stretch it for 3, 4, 5, 6 days. We want to try to get it done within a day or two as best as possible. As I had mentioned here at the ISIJ, we have 5 different options to bury, or 5 different cemeteries to bury our loved ones. These 5 cemeteries include York Cemetery, which is here in the city of Toronto at 101 Sandlac Road. At Sandlac, we have what we are referred to as double graves, where we could bury one deceased on top of another. So these graves are typically 8 to 9 feet deep. The first burial takes place, there's a level of earth, and then a second burial can take place on top. We also have Meadowvale Cemetery in Brampton, Ontario. And at Meadowvale Cemetery, we also have double graves like we do at Sandlac. We also have Wadi Salam Cemetery, also known or nicknamed as Abu Ali, which is at Kennedy and Elgin Mills in Markham, where we have single-level graves. We also have Forest Lawn Cemetery in London, Ontario, where we have single-level graves. And we also have Chapel Hill Memorial Gardens in Stony Creek, again, where we have single-level graves. You must understand that the ISIJ of Toronto does not own nor operate any of these cemeteries. We merely just hold interment rights at the cemeteries that allow us the privilege of burying our loved ones and our members there. ISIJ members, in turn, also do not own the internment right at the cemetery. That right is still held by the ISIJ of Toronto. Maintenance of each and every cemetery is the sole responsibility of the cemetery owners and operators, and it has absolutely nothing to do with us here at the ISIJ. However, if you notice or have any maintenance-related concerns, you are more than welcome to email us either at funeral@jaffari.org or at funeralsec@jaffari.org, and we will ensure that your concerns are raised with the cemetery owners and operators as we meet with them on a regular basis. All of us, as members of the ISIJ of Toronto, are actually bound by the bylaws, the terms and the conditions of each and every cemetery, and these terms and conditions of the cemeteries are subject to change at any given time without any notice. You should also be aware that if you decide to bury your loved one at Wadi Salam Cemetery, they require an additional out-of-pocket expense, which is currently $1,900, for the marker stone and for maintenance purposes. That headstone marker stone cost is $1,900. It will be made payable to the ISIJ after the burial has taken place. And finally, any of the cemeteries where we have deep or double graves, these are available on a first-come, first-served basis. So what does that mean? This means that if you chose to bury your loved one at one of these cemeteries that has a double grave or double-level grave, you will not have the option of burying your loved one on top immediately following their burial. First and foremost, once the ISIJ fills up all of the lower level graves, we will then be using all of the upper level graves on a first come, first served basis. So you will not have the choice of who's going to be buried on top of your loved one. Of course, until we use up all of that lower level, which is right now approximately 600 graves, then you will have the option. Until that lower level is filled up, you will have the option. You know, if you'd like to bury another loved one on top or leave it open for somebody else to be buried on top. So one of the things that we've done here at ISIJ is we have developed a standard funeral service for all. And in developing a standard funeral service, the reason we've done this is that there should be no differentiation when someone passes away, whether they're rich or they're poor, they're wealthy or they're not, whether they're educated or not. There is absolutely no segregation in terms of how we perform their burial services here. When it comes to the burial service, you will have the recitation of the Holy Quran, where we will recite 3 surahs, Surah Yasin, Surah Mulk, as well as Surah Rahman. We will allow the family of up to 2 speeches, no more than 5 minutes. Jaffari Funeral Services will also say a few words on behalf of the community, as well as to explain the process. There will be viewing of the deceased as well, or the final ziyarat of the deceased, provided the family has provided permission to do so. And there will be the funeral prayer, the Salatul Mayat, and then we will proceed to burial. And when we get to burial, we will have the recitation of the Kalme Shahada. We'll have recitation of Talqeen, and we'll proceed to burial. In addition, we'll have the siyako, or the meal that comes after the burial. And at the siyako, we typically will just have, for gents, we will have the recitation of Surah Yasin, following that the recitation of ziyarat, and then the meal will be served. For ladies, you have the option of hosting a ladies' majlis while the gents are at the cemetery. The ladies will host a ladies' majlis with the recitation of the Holy Quran, marasiya if it's possible, a short lecture, and then the siyako in itself will be served here at JCC. So being a member of the ISIJ of Toronto definitely has its benefits, at least when it comes to funeral services. First and foremost, you will have a fully and complete funeral service that would be arranged by making that one phone call to the Mukhi. Okay? Unlike other centers where you have to do the runaround to get all the paperwork and make all the arrangements, here we are privileged as being members. We make that one phone call to the office of the Mukhi, and everything else is looked after immediately following. Transportation of the deceased is also included from anywhere within the province of Ontario. Yes, within the province of Ontario. So the deceased could have passed away in Sudbury, Ontario, or Kenora, or Peterborough, Cornwall, or if you go out to Niagara or Stony Creek, the deceased's transportation is included from within the province of Ontario. The cost, one of the things that's also included for members is the cost of a hall rental. So a designated space within any one of our facilities, whether it's here at Jaffari Community Center, whether it's at the Masumin Islamic Center, Rezavi Islamic Center, or at the newly formed Zainabia Islamic Center in Barrie, a member is entitled to a hall rental within the first 3 days of the passing of their loved one to host an Isal Sawab Majlis. Of course, hall rental is subject to availability as well as any ISIJ programming. And As members, you're also afforded facilitation of the professional counseling services that are offered through Jaffari Support Services, and this is included at any time, not just at the time of death, but it could be any time. It could even be weeks or months after someone has passed away. Jaffari Support Services is available to provide the necessary assistance through various different types of counselors and so on to assist any grieving family members to get through the grief process. The ISIJ will sponsor an Isale Sawab Majlis on the first Thursday night after the burial has taken place for the Isale Sawab of the marhum or marhuma who's passed away. And this is again on the first Thursday night after the burial. So if the burial takes place on a Thursday, the Isale Sawab Majlis will be scheduled for the following Thursday. And if you are a member and you pass away overseas, the ISIJ will provide reimbursement of burial expenses anywhere in the world, provided an application is made with the appropriate documentation and backup documentation. And this is covered to the lesser of the actual cost or a maximum of $5,000, whichever is lesser, the ISIJ will cover. So for example, if you were traveling and your loved one passed away and you decided to bury them where they passed away, many of our parents have the wish, or grandparents even have the wish that, you know, if I'm traveling, bury me wherever I pass away, don't bother bringing me back to Toronto, for example. And if you honored their wishes and you buried them, say in the UK, or if they were in ziyarat, whatever the cost you incur overseas will be covered up to a maximum of $5,000. All you have to do is you come back home. When you're ready and you have all your paperwork, just make an application to the Jamaat office, and they will guide you through the entire process. And once everything is cleared, you will receive whatever the amount of payment is up to that $5,000 limit. You've heard me talk about siyako or karimani, or that food or the meal that's served after someone passes away. Well, as the next of kin, you have the option, you have to select one of three options. Whether it is to serve that meal here at JCC after burial for up to 100 people, or to have that meal sent home for up to 3 days for up to 30 people per day, or you have the option of donating the full cost of that siyako to a registered charitable organization, which must be approved by the board of directors. The only reason that caveat is in there is to ensure that the money is being transferred to a legitimate organization that does not have any blockages or any boundaries on them, either through CRA or through any religious office, i.e. the Marjaz office, for example. So this burial assistance plan is already linked to your membership as a member of the ISIJ. It is not something that you can purchase separately. So it comes as a package deal. You're a member of the ISIJ, and with that you get the burial privileges. New members, if you're a newer member, you are subject to a vesting period, and I will talk about the vesting period and show you what that looks like on this slide right here. So when you are being vested in your very first year, you have zero coverage for burial expenses. In your second year as a member, you only get 10% coverage. So your family or the next of kin is responsible for the other 90% that would be outstanding. So if I use an example, that a typical burial costs $10,000, and that number isn't that far off, by the way, but I'm using it just as an example, just so the math is easy to follow. If you are a member who's only been a member of the ISIJ for 2 years, the next of kin will be responsible for paying $9,000 out of that $10,000. You'll only be covered for 10%, being that $1,000. However, once you fast forward and you get to year number 10, you're only covered for 90%, and therefore your next of kin has to pay only $1,000 out of their pocket. But once you get to year 11 and beyond, you have full coverage of under the burial assistance plan, regardless of what that burial may cost. Today's costs are roughly about $10,000, and they are continually increasing, but that makes no difference. Once you are a member, you are fully covered up to, it doesn't matter what that cost is going to be from year 11 onwards. And so this is something to keep in mind. If I take the average family, a husband, wife, and 4 children, the total membership fee for that family is going to be $750 at today's rates. $750 covers all 6 individuals in the family. It'll cover all children once they reach the age of 18. Now, when you look at how much the Jamaat, based on your age and whatnot, takes out from that membership fee and transfers to the burial assistance scheme, you would be quite shocked. For a typical family of 6, only about $30 to $35 is coming out of the $750 going towards the burial assistance scheme. As you get older, more money comes out of the membership fee towards the burial assistance scheme. The reason we have this vesting period in place is to prevent any abuse of the burial assistance plan in itself. This prevents someone who's just fallen ill and to become a member in the hopes of getting the burial privileges. So what do we do if you're not a member? If you are not a member of the ISIJ, we will only provide non-member funerals that meet a very specific criteria, and that criteria includes, number 1, that the deceased is visiting from out of province or out of country and is a member in good standing of the Jamaat where they primarily reside, okay? Number 2, that the deceased is visiting and is related to a member of the ISIJ, and that relation has been defined in the bylaws as immediate family, mother, father, siblings, mother-in-law, father-in-law, brother-in-law, or sister-in-law, okay? Number 3, in the event that the ISIJ of Toronto is notified of a deceased by authorities, such as the police or a coroner, in the event that there is a body at their facilities that has not been claimed, and if they've determined that it is a Muslim, then they may approach us, and in that case, we will fulfill the requirements of burial. In the event, number 4, in the event that the ISIJ is contacted by another Shia organization seeking assistance, oftentimes we are asked by other Shia organizations here locally to assist them with their burial process, because either they don't have the facilities or they don't have the means, i.e. the volunteers are not available, or more recently we provided services to an organization where all of their volunteers were away and they'd gone for pilgrimage. And so we are able to provide that assistance to those organizations when they are in need. And finally, the last but not least, any non-member funeral will be provided at the discretion of the president of the ISIJ or his or her designate. And again, these policies are in place not because we don't want to assist anyone. You can understand that, number 1, we are governed by the Bereavement Authority of Ontario, where we have strict rules and regulations that we have to follow in terms of who we can provide funeral services for, but also to limit any abuse that may take place, because again, all of these services that are provided by volunteers. And you can understand that if, we're handling non-member funerals on a daily basis, our volunteers would probably be, be on call 7 days a week, and that in itself is also taxing on the resources that we have here at the ISIJ as well. So what do we do with non-members? We don't just turn them away. We refer them to other Shia Muslim funeral providers, and they will make all of their arrangements with that organization. However, in the event that we do provide services for non-members, the next of kin will be responsible for all of the associated costs, and burial will be done at a cemetery of our choosing. The family will not have the choice to bury at one of the 5 cemeteries. That will be left up to the ISIJ. The cost of funeral services is determined by the ISIJ Board of Directors and the Secretariat Office, and these costs are updated on an annual basis. So now, brothers and sisters, we are going to move into the ghusl and kafan demonstration. However, before I do so, I will open up to the floor if anybody has any questions about the process or the procedures that we have implemented here at the ISIJ. So if there's any questions, please raise your hands either on the ladies or the gents side. There's microphones on both.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum. So what I want to know is when my kids were under 18, they were all covered by our membership. And now, say my daughter is moved to BC. So how does that work? And she may stay there for a year or two, but in terms of continuity, how does that work?
So once an individual turns 18, they are responsible for continuing the membership, either at a student rate or a single member rate, whatever the case may be. And it is up to that individual to carry that forward. So if they are turning 18 and they've just left the family, they've come out from under the family umbrella, there's no vesting period for them, provided they continue on. If they lapse in their membership, under the ISIJ, GOBL and bylaws, there are provisions. I may be speaking out of turn, but so don't hold me to this. But I believe there's call it a 5-year grace period where they can back pay up to 5 years to receive continual membership. But don't hold me to that one. I'd have to go back and check.
Okay, thank you.
We have one question on this side.
Yep.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Excellent presentation, thank you. The question is for under 18 children. Of course, they're covered in the family membership, so they would be covered, I guess. The burials would be. Now, how does it work when they are new in the country? So the same rules apply, the vesting period and all that. And the second question, if I may, and if you have time, is if it's a non-member, Muslim, we would bury them, wouldn't we? But we may not bury them in our own cemeteries or whatever. What are the rules there? How would you deal with that?
Thank you for your question. So with respect to a new member coming in from overseas, as far as I am aware, they are subject to the full vesting period, like anybody becoming a new member of the ISIJ. To answer your second question, as I had mentioned, we do not provide services for non-members unless it meets one of the requirements that I had gone through, the 5 criteria. However, if for whatever reason a Shia Muslim funeral provider is unable to fulfill the responsibilities and provide the services, the ISIJ will step in to assist the family as best as we possibly can. However, in the first instance, we will refer them to the other providers and allow them to make their own arrangements. Failing that, we will step in if need be. Question from the ladies, and then I see a couple hands in the front row here as well.
Assalamu alaikum. I also have 2 questions. So one question was, you said that ISIJ has interment rights at 5 cemeteries. So what if a member passes away and their wish was to be buried at a cemetery other than one of those 5? For example, Toronto Muslim Cemetery. That's the first question. Second question is, what if you have a child or children who are 18 and over, they're their own members, but the parents are not members? So in that event, if their parent passes away, they're not visiting, but would they have the same rights as a visiting member of the immediate family of an existing ISIJ member?
So I'm going to start with your second question first because it's probably the easiest to answer. The answer is no. If the parents are residing here and they chose not to be a member of the ISIJ despite their children being members, they will be, when they pass away, the next of kin will be referred to a third-party Shia Muslim funeral provider to carry out their ghusl, kafan, and burial. To answer your first question with respect to what if the deceased wishes to be buried at a cemetery of their own choosing, we will most definitely honor their wishes. So for example, if they wish to be buried at the Toronto Muslim Cemetery, for example, the family is responsible for paying for the cost of the plot at the cemetery. However, the ISIJ burial scheme, if the person is a member, will cover the opening and closing costs the same way we would at any of the 5 cemeteries that we have. I'm going to switch over to the gents side. There's a few questions here.
So I just wanted to ask, what is the difference between the 5 cemeteries and how do we choose which one we want to be buried?
So the difference between the 5 cemeteries is a location. So we have one in Toronto, Markham, Brampton, London, and Stony Creek. So that's the first difference. The second difference is of double level graves or single level graves. And so the choice is really entirely up to you, or up to you as the individual to make that decision as to where would you like to be buried. So for example, if you had said that you wish to be buried at Sanlak, you need to understand that it is a double level grave. It is a non-Muslim cemetery, but in a Muslim section itself, so that's something to understand as well. And you must understand that somebody else could be buried on top of you should all of the lower level graves be filled. Or if you decided to be buried at Al Hussein Foundation at Wadi Salam, you need to understand that those are all single level graves, and it is a fully Muslim cemetery. And so, it's a personal choice or personal preference, really.
So just a supplementary question, can a non-Muslim be buried above you?
No. So when we have the double level graves, they are in our section. We have purchased the interment rights. So no, a non-Muslim cannot be buried on top of you. Okay. This question. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
In reference to your the question to BAP, whereby somebody who's or become 18 now pays on him or herself, and then gets married to a spouse who is not a member. How does that fit in? And if something happens, in which category do they fall in?
So to answer your question, the spouse, should they not be a member, they will be classified as a non-member at the end of the day. So our ISIJ membership is on an individual basis. Once you turn 18, it's an individual membership, and it's $375. And I'm just using the adult, not the student rates or anything, but an adult is $375 per adult. Okay, so if the husband is a member, but the wife decided not to become a member, she would not be covered under the BAP. She would be treated as if she is a non-member. However, any children that they may have would be covered under the member as well.
Just to clarify my question, so a single person gets married.
Yep.
The spouse is not a member as yet. They start paying $750. The single person has been a member for quite some time. After 18, say she or he gets married at 27. So she's been a good standing member for about 9 years. And when she or he gets married, that person who he or she's getting married to, under what category does he have only that person, the person that got married? Does that table start just for him as year one, or is automatically as what the other spouse was with? Or
so if one spouse has been a member of the ISIJ from 18 onwards,
correct,
and his or her spouse is not a member, and they've just gotten married, he or she would have to become a member. So membership previously was based on single, and then it turned into a family membership. We no longer have a family membership under the GOBL. So it's always on an individual basis. So the individual who's been a member for decades will remain as a member. However, his or her spouse falls under the non-member category until that person becomes a member. And then they are still subject to that vesting period.
Yeah, so they become a member, the person becomes a member.
Yep.
Okay, but then the question is, does he or she then start with year one? Or is automatically with the spouse?
With year one.
So one person will be at the age of 9 years, the second will be at 1 year.
That's right. So for example, when I got married, being a member, I was fully vested and covered. When my spouse moved over to Canada, she was not a member of the ISIJ. She started her vesting period right at year one. Any questions on the ladies' side? Any more on the gent side?
I'm a member of Council of Islamic Guidance, more than 25 years. And I'd like to be a new member, inshallah. My wish to be my final process will be done here in the Jaffari, because of the difference between the council and here. So what we have the land already there in the Wadi Islam. So what will be the cost if I'll be a new member?
So you would have to become a member under the burial assistance plan. As I had mentioned, the average cost for a funeral is still $10,000. Again, that's just an average number I'm using. It's not specific to any one cemetery. I can tell you that the numbers aren't that far off between cemeteries. And so if you became a member today and you passed away 3 years from now, you would only be vested up to that year 3 period. So your family would be responsible for the remainder of the cost, which would be approximately $7,000 at that time.
I have my land already Wadi Islam. Concept Islamic guidance, they have already land there.
You've already purchased your land?
Yeah, my land already there.
Yep.
So land is not a problem.
Okay.
Not purchase means if I go there, they will take me to Wadi Islam.
Yep.
So they do all the process for me there. So my wish is to be done here.
Okay.
So land is already there.
So if you already have your own plot
Yeah.
and you're a member, we would look after the funeral services for you here at JCC and look after the whole process. However, your family or your next of kin would still be subject to the vesting period. Okay, and there would be costs allocated. So I don't have the numbers in front of me to be exact, but there would be cost for use of facilities and transportation and so on and so forth, which would be prorated based on your membership. Just before we continue with live questions here, I'm going to do a couple from online, just because there are a few. One of the questions that came in was, if the death occurs due to a car accident, should the mukhi be contacted after the hospital certifies death? And the answer is no. Please give the mukhi a call as soon as you know that the person has passed away, regardless of how they have passed away, so that way we may begin making the necessary preparations here on our end. Someone has also asked if the material being presented today can be shared, as it's very important. We will endeavor, inshallah, to get a lot of this information posted at jaffari.org/funeral. So just keep in touch with that site, and inshallah, you'll start to receive a lot of this information. What is our involvement? I'll take one more from online, then I'll kind of go back to the live audience. What is the involvement of Jaffari Funeral Services when it comes to a death occurring at home, for example, a natural death? And what is the involvement of authorities? So if someone naturally passes away at home, you still have to call 911. You would still call the authorities. They would send paramedics who would, try to resuscitate. And if that's not possible, then they will wait for the police to come, who will ensure that it's not a suspicious death of any sort. And then what they will try to do is get the death certified right there at the house. Oftentimes, we're able to get the coroner to certify the death at the home, and they'll allow us to pick up the mayat from the house and bring it straight to the center. If a coroner is not available, or if they suspect any sort of foul play, they tend to request for that deceased to be taken to their facilities, where they will do either an autopsy or blood tests, etc. And thereafter, we will come in and pick up the body from the coroner's facility. However, it's important, and this brings up a good question because it's important. If it is a coroner case, it's important that you give us a phone call and inform us of this, so that way we can do whatever we can within the powers that we have and within the context that we have at the Ontario Coroner's Office to try to get that body released either right there on the spot or as soon as possible without them doing an invasive test or invasive autopsy to the body. So one of the things that we often do is we will call the coroner, we will have a conversation with them, we will let them know and inform them of our religion and what our faith tells us, and then we will, ultimately it's still their decision, but we will try to steer them as best as we can. And oftentimes, we've had the coroner come straight to the house and certified the death right there at the house. Or in one instance, the coroner said, listen, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, we're not coming out right now. However, we know who you guys are. You know what, you can take the body to your center, but do not do anything to the body, i.e. do not start to wash the body and shroud the body. They came here to our facility and examined the body before they gave us either a warrant to bury or death certificate. So again, if someone passes away at home, you still got to go through the regular process of calling 911. Paramedics will come, police will come, coroner will come, and we go from there. Again, someone may pass away in the hospital, and a coroner may be called to the hospital. For example, someone was being treated in the hospital, and they took a slip and a fall in the hospital itself. Well, in that case, the doctors may refer it to the coroner because there was an injury that took place within their facility, because they need to also protect their risk and liability as well. And again, we have these conversations with the coroner, with the doctors, to try to expeditiously release the body to us. I'll take questions in-house. I know there's a couple questions here in the front.
Assalamu alaikum. I have a couple of questions. So one, not the detailed numbers, just the higher level breakdown for the cost of the burial, the land and all those service, number one. And second, if the deceased has some donation organ to some organizations, so who will kick in there, like the proceedings? Is the kin or the Jamaat will look after it? Just a brief intro on this.
So costs, I don't have numbers in front of me at all, so I apologize, but I could tell you the average cost is about $10,000, all said and done. Okay, I don't have a breakdown in front of me. If you're looking for a breakdown, that can be obtained from the Secretariat office. To answer your second question about the deceased's wishes in terms of donations and disbursements, really, pardon me? Oh, organs. In terms of organ donation in Islam is actually not permitted. And so then, it's something that we all need to be aware of, that it's not permitted. And if we've made that decision to do so, it's up to the next of kin to fulfill those wishes. It's not something that we at the ISIJ can fulfill. Likewise, if a deceased had in their will that for whatever reason they wish to be cremated, for example, and again, cremation is haram, it is not permissible, but if that was in their wish for whatever reason, we cannot fulfill that requirement under any circumstances. It is up to the next of kin to make that decision and execute the will and the last rites, the will and testament of their deceased.
We have a question on the ladies' side.
Sure.
If we could have some clarification on what's included within the funeral services. So for example, what does the mukhi help out with after the call is made? So is land covered? What kind of services is included, costs and whatnot? If you could go into a little bit more detail, please.
High level, what is covered in terms of the costs? Everything from, so once that call is made to the mukhi, everything is covered from transportation of the deceased, all of the proceedings here at the center, so ghusl, kafan, the burial, the salatul mayat proceeding, the meal or the siyako is fully covered, as well as the cost of the plot, the opening and closing costs of the plot, and the burial itself. So everything start to finish is covered for a member under those costs. Okay?
Oh, sorry. What happens in the case where a body can't be recovered or can't be found?
What happens in the case when a body cannot be recovered or be found?
For example, let's say a plane crash. What's the procedure?
So in that situation, and I don't know all of the religious rulings surrounding that, so you're going to have to forgive me. That's a question we can take back, but I can tell you that if there is no body or body parts to be buried, there's nothing that we can do from our end at Jaffari Funeral Services, okay? However, if it's a member who has passed away, we will still have the Salis Sawab Majlis for them. We will still have, the hall rental will still be available and so on and so forth. So the remainder of the BAP will be available except for the burial in itself. I'll take two more questions and then we're gonna get into the demonstration itself.
Assalamu alaikum.
Salam.
So you mentioned in the case of someone passing away in a different country and their wish may be to be buried wherever they passed away. In the event that they want to come back and be passed away, be buried somewhere in Toronto at one of the burials, the centers, is it covered by ISIJ in the sense of the body coming back and everything else up to that 5,000 and whatever else, or not?
No. Transportation of the deceased, i.e. bringing them back to Ontario, is not covered under the BAP under any circumstances. Transportation and everything that is associated with transportation of the deceased is the sole responsibility of the next of kin.
But if it comes back, you will take care of it.
But if it's a member, we will definitely take care of the full services. However, I will put the caveat in there that you should be aware of the circumstances, and I don't have all of them with me, but you should be aware of the circumstances in which you can bring a body back and what the rulings are with respect to embalming. So, this is something that needs to be taken a look at a little bit more closely, because when a plane travels above certain altitudes based on rules and regulations of Transport Canada as well as other agencies, they do have requirements from whether it's icing the body, whether it's embalming the body, and so on and so forth. And you would have to look at all of the requirements and then confer that with the religious requirements that we have, whether it's permissible or not. Okay? And I'll take one final question. Yes.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Thank you, Kazim, for the excellent presentation. And the Jamaat is really indebted to you and the entire Funeral Port Services community, because this is one area where there is no timing. As you said, it's 24/7. So the volunteers and the team and the leadership has to be ready for any call. So that is really appreciated, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and the entire team. We talked about the adult deaths, like 18 plus and so many. What about the fetal death? How are you handling it, and the cost involved for the fetal death? So let's say somebody is expecting and the baby dies and it's 4 months and 10 days. So how is the costing and all that stuff?
When it comes to a fetal death or an infant death, there are various Sharia-related rulings in terms of, how we perform ghusl, kafan, burial, etc. That aside, anytime that there is a fetal death, as long as the mother is a member of the ISIJ in good standing, we will look after everything from start to finish. Now, when it comes to fetal deaths, of course, there is no siako, or there's no, in some cases, no salatul mayyit, etc. But whatever is required to perform the last rites, we will look after it in-house. No, the cost is not that $10,000 number. It's significantly less. But again, if they're a member, it's fully covered under the BAP, so it shouldn't make any difference. If they are a member who is just being vested in, the costs will be prorated based on their vesting, because there are costs associated for things like use of facility, hall rental, transportation, and so on and so forth. But of course, as much as we talk about costs, I do want to say that one of the things that we are very careful about is not treating this as a profitable business. We are not in this to make money by any means. We are here to provide a service to our members to ease their burden at the end of the day. And so monetarily aside, we've had cases where there's people who cannot simply afford, but they're a member who's not fully vested, but they can't afford. We will look after, we will assist them and get them through that process, whether it's a payment plan, whether it's looking after it, and so on and so forth. I do want to address your first point. I do thank you for your comment. However, we are by no means is anybody from Jaffari Funeral Services indebted. The Jamaat is not indebted to us by any means, neither is the membership. It is an absolute privilege for us to be able to provide these facilities. So I do thank you for your comment. All we ask is that you please remember us, inshallah, in your prayers as well, so we can continue to provide these services. With that, brothers and sisters, we are going to break out for the live ghusl and kafan demonstration. Online viewers, you will be shown a video recording of the ghusl and kafan demonstration. And what we are going to do is we are going to start with the ladies doing a tour of the ghusl kafan facilities, and then the ladies will move into Zainabiyya Hall B for the demonstration. And likewise, gents, once the ladies have finished, we will flip so we can go into the ghusl kafan facilities, but we will host the gents demonstration right here simultaneously. And one of the requests that I have is that when we are making our way to the ghusl kafan facilities, and not trying to discriminate, but we are going to ask that the youngsters go first and have the ability to take that tour first, and then we'll ask all of the seniors to go thereafter on both sides as well. Thank you.
Can we can we have all the youth come through this door, please? Just all the youth, thank you.
Site at jaffari.org/funeral. In the event of death or passing of a loved one, regardless of where the passing takes place, be it at a private residence, long-term care facility, nursing facility, or hospital, we humbly request that you ensure that the arms and the legs of the deceased remain straight or are straightened out, that the eyes and the mouth of the deceased are closed, and if need be, to close the mouth, use a handkerchief or a piece of cloth to tie it from chin and around the head, and gently do that. Ensure that all foreign objects that are on the deceased are removed. This includes any dentures, earrings, rings, watches, necklaces, as well as any medical apparatus that can easily be removed. And it is highly recommended that the feet of the mayat are facing towards the Qibla. The mayat is in a well-lit room and is covered with a clean cloth. In addition, and in accordance with Islamic Sharia, when the mayat arrives at the ghusl kafan facility, we do not do any makeup or any grooming work to the mayat. The mayat receives the ghusl and kafan as it is upon its arrival. Unlike other faith groups where they will dress the deceased in a suit or a fancy outfit and arrange for makeup and so on and so forth, in accordance with Islamic Sharia, we perform the washing of the body. We will do the 3 ghusls followed by kafan, which is essentially a white shroud which is placed over the body, which you are about to witness in this instructional video. Once you have made the call to the office of the Mukhi or to the ISIJ of Toronto Jamaat offices, that is all that you need to do. That one call triggers the mobilization of volunteers and the arrangement of transportation of the mayat, as well as arranging the ghusl, kafan, and burial procedures, including the completion of any regulatory paperwork required for permits and burial. Alhamdulillah, we are blessed at the Jaffari Community Center to be able to have these facilities, and we take pride in building those relationships that we have built with the authorities having jurisdiction to allow us to expeditiously complete the last rites of the marhum or marhuma. Here at 9000 Bathurst Street, we are blessed to have a state-of-the-art ghusl kafan facility, which has been donated by Al-Hajj Abid Bhai Hemani and his family in memory of their late father, marhum Habib Jadavji Hemani, and we request that everyone recite a Surah Fatiha for marhum Habib Jadavji Hemani and the members of the Hemani family. Al-Fatiha. As you can see, as we tour through the ghusl kafan facility at 9000 Bathurst Street, it is a large, state-of-the-art facility, which includes all of the apparatus and tools required to perform the last rites of the deceased. Here, we also have one of the most state-of-the-art electronic water mixing facilities to mix the berry leaf water, the camphor water, and to provide the plain water, which are used for the three different ghusls which you are about to witness in the video. Also, here at our facility, we have 2 full-size coolers where we can place mayats and store them overnight, and these have graciously been donated by QBD. Also in this room, as you can see, we have large boards, instructional boards, which not only serve as tools to educate schools and the madaris, that students that come to visit, but also act as a checklist for our own volunteers when they are performing the last rites of the deceased. And now we'll move on to the live demonstration of ghusl and kafan.
Okay, so we have the dead body, the mayyit here, which has been brought over by the ghusl and kafan committee to the ghusl room. And we will be performing, inshallah, the ghusl on this mayyit. But before we do the ghusl, it is important that the family of the deceased ensures that any foreign objects which are on the body are removed, either if it's in the hospital or at home, so that when the Mayyat committee is bringing the body over to the ghusl room, all foreign objects are removed, such as rings or anything that might be on the body that is removable, okay? Dentures if possible, so that it's easy for us to give the ghusl. And lastly, the ghusl will be performed today with assistance from the ghusl committee members, inshallah. And we look forward to preparing for the washing of the body before we do the ghusl. Before we start preparing the ghusl, the most important rule of thumb, that whoever is giving the ghusl, especially if it's a member of the family, whatever they see in the ghusl room stays in the ghusl room. Whatever we see here on the dead body, on the mayyit, does not go outside. You do not talk to your wife or to your father or to your best friend or to anybody for that matter. It stays inside the ghusl room. Simply because we are witnessing the uyub of a dead person, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is satarul uyub, and He expects us to cover the defects of a person. Therefore, saying anything that we see here in the ghusl room is gunah. It's a sin. It's a major sin, and you should make sure that whatever you see here stays inside the ghusl room. We have the board here, which is very handy. These are tips for newcomers who are giving ghusl. The ghusl committee knows them, but for those who are newcomers giving ghusl, they will ensure that the pattern of giving the ghusl is followed. Before we give the ghusl, we will wash the body thoroughly to clean it of all najasat that's there or that may be there, before we are ready to give the 3 ghusls and then the kafan and hunut to the dead body. One final note, that before we give or before we begin the ghusl, we have to take the permission of the wasi or the wali of the dead person. In other words, whoever is the guardian of the mayyit, who is in charge of the burial arrangements for that person, we have to take the permission that they give us the authority or the permission to give ghusl on their behalf. Because giving ghusl mayyit is wajib on everybody. But when few individuals step up to do that duty, then that obligation is removed on the rest of the members. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So we start with the washing of the body. Okay, first. So now we have washed the body thoroughly, okay? We have cleaned it to ensure that there is no najasat. There's nothing that is remaining which will prevent the water or the ghusl being given to the body. If there's any tape or any sticky issues that might be on the body, it has been cleaned and removed. And so the body is ready for ghusl. So the first ghusl that we will give is the ghusl with berry leaves, okay? Abe Sidr, which is called. And we will do the niyat that we are giving ghusl with berry leaves to this mayyat, wajib kurbatan ilallah. Now, in the event, if we are not in a position to get berry leaves, we happen to be in a place where it's not available, even the powder form is not available, then in that case, what will happen is that we will give ghusl with pure water, with the intention that we are giving ghusl to this dead body with pure water, replacing the ghusl of berry leaves, wajib kurbatan ilallah, and on top of that, you will also do one tayammum. That is for the ghusl of berry leaves. If it's not available, then you will wash it with pure water, ab khalis, and after having done the ghusl, you will do one tayammum on the body as well. So we're getting ready to get started to give ghusl with berry leaves. Okay, so I have pressed the button for the berry leaf water to come through, and it should be coming in through. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The ghusl always will be given in a tartibi mode. That means we will be giving ghusl to the dead body the way we do ghusl on ourselves, starting with the head and the neck, and then washing the front part of the right side of the body, all the way from the shoulders right to the tip of the toe and the legs. And once we finish the front part, we will do the back side of the right part of the body, all the way till the heels, and then we will turn the body. We will actually turn the body, yes, we'll go on to the left side, and we will wash the left side of the body, right from the shoulders, all the way to the tip of the toes, and then we will turn the body and wash the back side. Now, as a precaution, what we do is once we have finished washing the back side of the left part of the body, we do something extra, which is washing the private parts thoroughly well. Although it has been washed whilst doing the right side and the left side, but we just want to make sure that the water has reached everywhere, simply because we cannot see it. So we want to ensure that the water is reaching everywhere. So we will wash the private parts one more time in the front and at the back, and that will end our ghusl. So we are beginning with giving ghusl of berry leaves to this mayyat, wajib kurbatan ilallah. If somebody can assist me with the holding of the head. We have to make sure that the water reaches everywhere. And we want to ensure that you're moving your hand across the body and making sure the earlobes, the neck, and all the hair and the face is covered. And now we're washing the front part of the body. If somebody can just hold a hand so I can wash the armpits. Always make sure that the armpits are washed properly. Okay, making sure water reaches everywhere. As you can see that we have members of the ghusl team assisting us to ensure water reaches everywhere. There's no spot that is left out. So the front part is all done. We just want to make sure you're washing the front part. Okay. So the front part is done. Now we will tilt the body so that we can wash the right side from the back. Again, making sure I'm just putting my hand across to ensure that the water reaches everywhere into the private parts, using the flow of water to ensure that all the najasat has come out, keeping my face away from the private parts. Okay. So the back side has been washed. Now we will come to the left side of the body and begin washing the front part. Same procedure. We're going to wash the front side all the way from the shoulders to the tip of the toes, and then we will tilt the body and wash the back side. Okay? Okay, so the front part is done, and what I will do is to ensure that I'm washing the private parts again, keeping an eye on the water to see if there's any najasat coming in. If by any chance, if we do see a najasat, then what we should do is we should stop right away and clean that najasat, whatever it may be, if it's bowel movement or blood, we clean it up to ensure that it's not there, and continue from where we have stopped the ghusl and finish it. So this is done. Now we will wash the back side of the left side of the body. Same thing. Okay, we're done with the ghusl of berry leaves, Ab-Sidr. On this mayat, we have washed the body completely. We've given the ghusl completely, both the right side and the left side, the head of course, and the neck, and the private parts as well. So we're done with the first ghusl, which is with berry leaves. One thing that we have to keep in mind is that the order has to be followed, meaning that we have to always start with the ghusl of berry leaves, followed by the second ghusl, which is Ab Kafur, or which is the camphor, ghusl with camphor, and the third, which is ghusl with pure water, Ab Khalis. That order has to be followed at all times. It cannot be that one fine day we decided that, okay, we're going to start with pure water today and then give berry leaves the last. No, it has to be that sequence always. And as I said, that if for any reason the kafur is not available, just as berry leaves were not available, then we go to plan B. Option B is that you will give ghusl with pure water to the dead body, replacing the kafur, and you will do the niyat that I'm giving ghusl to this mayat with pure water, replacing Abi kafur, wajib kurbatan ilallah, and you'll give ghusl with pure water, and after the ghusl, you'll give one tayammum as well. And the last one, which is the ghusl with pure water, that itself is it suffices because it's basically ghusl with pure water. So you just do the niyat that you are giving ghusl with pure water, Abi Khalis, to the dead body, wajib qurbatan ilallah. So we are going to start with the second ghusl on this dead body. and that is the ghusl with Abi Kafur, camphor water, and the niyat will be we're giving ghusl to this mayyit with Abi Kafur, wajib qurbatan ilallah. And we will basically be doing the same thing that we did with the first ghusl, the same format and the same flow of washing and giving ghusl to the body. Okay, so we're done with the ghusl of Abi Kafur, and now we will do the third ghusl, which is ghusl with Abi Khalis, which is pure water, and we are going to be giving ghusl to this mayyit or to this dead body with pure water, Abi Khalis, wajib qurbatan ilallah. Okay, alhamdulillah, we have finished giving all the three ghusl to the dead body. And now, before we give the coffin and do the shrouding to the dead body, we will first ensure that we clean the body and dry the body thoroughly well so that there's no wetness to be found in any part of the body before we give the hunut and do the shrouding and give the coffin. So we will clean the body thoroughly well and dry it and ensure that it's all ready before we move on to the next step. Okay, alhamdulillah, we have finished giving the ghusl to the dead body, and now comes the process of shrouding the dead body. But before we do the coffin, I would like to show you what the coffin actually consists of. Now, as far as the male is concerned, there are three wajib parts to the coffin. The first one is the qamis, or which is the shirt. And as you can see, this is the shirt that we have. And it's basically just going to lap from the shoulders all the way to the middle of the calf of the person. And we have basically an incision done here in the middle so that the head goes in through. So this is basically the shirt or the qamis. That's the first one. Then we have the lungi or the loincloth. And this one basically is again going to cover from slightly above the navel all the way to the ankles. So that's the second part, which covers the body, second piece of coffin. And then we have the third piece, which is the chadar, or which is the overall covering, and that is going to cover the dead body completely from the head all the way to the tips of the toes. So it's going to cover the body completely. These three pieces are wajib. They must be there to give coffin. Now we have one extra piece, or rather we have two extra pieces in the coffin, and one which is the amama or the turban, and this is basically wrapped around the forehead. We'll show it to you later on when we're doing the actual kafan demonstration. So this is wrapped around the forehead with the flaps coming on to the side on the front part of the head of the dead body. And lastly, we have the Ran patch. Now this is not a wajib concept or part of the kafan, but actually it serves two main purposes. Number one, it will cover the private parts of the body. It's an additional covering. And number two, which is even more important, it's a lifesaver, meaning that it will prevent any najasat which is coming from the dead body, private parts of the dead body, and preventing the kafan from becoming najas. This can actually save your day. Imagine if you have a toddler wearing nice clothes without a diaper. What's going to happen if that toddler takes out bowel movement? So basically, this is really important. It saves us from any scenarios where the kafan can get najis, and then we have to bring the body back again and give the kafan again if it is really soaked all over or soiled all over najasat. So this is an important part. It is not wajib, but it is better to have it. Now, in today's day and age, we can use the diaper. It is not stitched or woven. It is basically consisting of paper and cotton, which has been pasted, and it is permissible to use it as part of the kafan as well. If you don't have diapers, you can use any piece of cloth that you have to cover the private parts, or if you have cotton available, okay, in the form of a roll, you can use that as well. That can come in handy as well to serve as the Ran patch or the underwear in the kafan of a mayit. So we have basically shown you all the parts. Now the last thing is that we have basically underneath the chadar are the straps which are on the lower side of the feet, and then we have one on the navel, and then we have one on the chest, and we have one which is finally next to the head. These straps are there to tie the body completely once the chadar is wrapped around the dead body, and the strings basically keep the kafan intact and the hands as well intact so that they don't slip out when you're trying to put the dead body into the coffin. And once you are burying the dead body, then you can sort of open them up a little bit and prepare the mayat for the burial. So basically, these are the parts of the kafan which are required. Now, in the event if you do not get all the three parts of the kafan, then at least one part should be there, which is the chadar, to cover the dead body completely so that you're able to cover the body and bury it if you don't have enough kafan to have the kameez and the lungi for the mayyit. We will now continue with the actual process of giving kafan to the dead body, but before we do that, we will show you how the kafan is laid out. Once that is done, then we will start the process of giving the kafan. So we are keeping the chadar, which is the outer covering, properly, so that when we are wrapping it around the mayyit, it is proper and it is covering all the parts. As you can see, if you take a closer look, you can see the straps of strings, ropes that we have to tie later on. And we will this is the qamis or the shirt that we're keeping it ready. And then we're going to keep the lungi, which is the loincloth. Over the qamis, and on the lower end of the body, which is going to cover from the navel to the ankles. We're keeping everything ready so that it makes it easier for us to simply give the kafan in a nice and orderly manner. Okay, so before we give the kafan to the mayyit, we have to give hunut to the dead body. And hunut basically is the act of rubbing camphor on the 7 parts of the body that are involved when we do the sajda, which is namely the forehead, the 2 palms of the hands, the 2 knees, and the tips of the 2 toes. And it's mustahab also to do it on the tip of the nose, but that's mustahab. Again, hunut is wajib, and it is recommended to start with the forehead first. After the forehead, any of the other 6 parts, which is the 2 palms, the 2 knees, and the tips of the 2 toes. You can do it in any order, but always start with preferably rubbing the forehead first and then the rest of the parts. Once again, very important, whilst we were giving the ghusl, we ensured that the private parts of the mayyit are covered at all times. The same scenario happens here. We have not yet begun the process of giving kafan to the mayyit. Therefore, when we are giving hunut, or when we have dried the body and preparing the mayyit for giving the kafan, we have to ensure that the private parts of the mayyit are covered at all times. And this will be only removed once we are starting to give the kafan and we have put the lungi and the qamis, and we can no longer see the private parts. We shall remove the covering that we have been putting on right from the get-go. We're now going to begin the process of giving hunut to the 7 parts of the body, which are involved when doing the sajda. And before we start doing the hunut, we make the niyat that we're giving hunut to this mayyit, wajib qurbatan ilallah. Hunut, again, as I said, is wajib. If camphor is available, then you should give it with camphor. And the recommendation is to start with the forehead and then continue with the other parts of the body involved in the sajda. So just take a little bit of it and rub it gently on the forehead. And then, as I mentioned to you, once you've done the forehead, you can do any other parts. There's no order required. So I'm doing here with the left hand, just a little bit, and rubbing the palms enough so that it reaches all the palm of the hand. Once again, ensuring at all times that the private parts of the body are covered and not visible. I'm just going to put a little bit camphor on the knees. And then lastly, the tip of the 2 toes, just the toes only, not the other parts of the leg, just the tip of the two toes. And I have some little bit of camphor left. I'm just going to put a little bit on the tip of the nose. And that finishes our hunut. Now we're ready to give the kafan to the mayyit because we have given the hunut, and that is the last part, giving the kafan before we begin the burial process. So we will begin with the kafan. As I mentioned to you, this part will still stay till we are sure that we have given the kafan completely. Okay, so before we do anything, I want to put the Ryan patch or the undercover inside, treating the body as gently as possible. If you can just help me with lifting the legs. Good. Okay. So basically this diaper covers the private parts of the body, and we're ensuring that it is placed in such a way that if any najasa or bowel movement comes out, the diaper will protect the kafan from getting najas. Now we're ready to give the kafan to the dead body. And once again, we'll do the niyat that we're giving kafan to this mayyit, wajib qurbatan ilallah. And as I mentioned earlier, that the Ran patch, the diaper, serves two purposes. One is to cover the private parts, and the other one, which is more important, is to prevent any najasat coming out from the private parts and making the kafan najas. So this is a lifesaver for us. It's not wajib, but it plays an important role, so we should make a point to put it in the kafan as well. We will begin with the kafan starting with the loincloth, or which is the lungi. And as I mentioned earlier, that the lungi will start slightly above the navel and up to the ankles. The minimum requirement is from the navel up to slightly below the knees, but we always ensure that we're covering it up to the ankle. It's recommended. Okay, so now as we are trying to pull the lungi in, we will slowly take out the part that was covering the private parts as the lungi is covering it. Gently. And one important thing or tip, if I may say, that we are basically grooming the mayyit. Therefore, we should try to make the kafan look as presentable as possible, because obviously once the mayyit leaves the ghusl room, it's going to go outside for viewing. The people will see the mayyit. Therefore, we want to make sure that the kafan looks elegant on the mayyit. In other words, it is presentable and it doesn't look that it has been put on sloppy. So we wrap the part in such a way that it overlaps. just that we want to make sure that it looks like a real lungi and that it is covering the parts properly. So we've given the lungi, the loincloth is covering it right above the navel, all the way to the ankle. Now we will give the kameez or the shirt, and it's very easy. As you can see when I showed earlier that we had an incision done right in the middle so that the head sort of goes through, and we just sort of overlap the front portion of the kameez. And the kameez or the shirt basically is covering the dead body right from the shoulders all the way to the middle of the calf. It's below the knees, right up to the middle portion of the shank. And the longer it is, the better. If you want to keep it all the way close to the ankles, even better. So we have done the lungi, we have done the shirt or the kameez. Now, before we do the chadar, we want to give the amama, which is mustahab. Again, it's not wajib, but it is recommended. And if you have extra piece available to give the kafan, then by all means. Yes. So we have done the amama as well, which is the turban. Please don't go to Maulana Rizvi and ask for a turban. This is something we have available, and it basically just involves a small piece of cloth that you cut it in, no formalities, just wrap it around the head and put it over as we showed it to you. That is optional. We're done with the kafan. One more portion, which is the wajib, and we're ready with the burial process. Now, you have been noticing right from the get-go that when I was giving the lungi to the dead body, we started to wrap it from the right side first, and then flipping over the left side of the lungi. With the chadar, we're going to use the same method, whereas we will flip the right portion of the chadar, which is the outer covering, and then go with the left portion, or the left side. The question is, why? Why can't we do the left side and the right side later on? The reason is, remember that we're giving kafan to a mayyit where the mayyit is not wearing any belts or does not have any buttons to hold the kafan. Therefore, by starting with the right side first, sort of covering from the right portion, and then the left side, the reason is that when we will be later on burying the mayyit in the grave and tilting the body so that the mayyit is facing qibla with the right side or the right shoulder on the ground, it will be easier for the kafan to stay intact. The kafan will not open up. Remember, nothing is holding the kafan from opening up. The only thing that can really be keeping the kafan intact is the strings that we're tying closely to keep the kafan intact, but simply starting with the right side prevents the kafan from opening up and revealing any parts of the body. So this is the chadar, which is the outer covering, and we are almost done with the kafan. As I told you, these strings play an important part in holding the coffin together. There are no belts, no safety pin, nothing to hold the coffin together, only these straps that we have. And you basically just tie it gently, it doesn't have to be tight. And the last part, the important part is to ensure that the chadar is long enough to cover the whole body and there is enough space for you to tie the strings. Now, as you can see that the coffin has been given to the dead body. The dead body is completely covered with the chadar, which acts as the total covering for the entire body, right from the head to the feet. And we have these straps which are tied. But once the body is taken to the graveyard and is ready for the burial, and when the body is being lowered down into the grave, then these straps will be opened up, will be loosened, so that the dead body can be buried. And that ends our session of ghusl, giving the hunut to the dead body, giving the kafan, and we are now ready to prepare for Salatul Mayyit, burial for the body. One final end the demonstration today, and that is for those of you who do give ghusl mayyit to a dead body. You have to remember that since you have touched a dead body, a mayyit, then ghusl mas mayyit, that is ghusl of touching a dead body, is wajib upon you. So you have to ensure that you also do the ghusl of ghusl mas mayyit, wajib qurbatan ilallah, so that you are able to cleanse yourself spiritually, and then you can say your wajib salah and whatever you have to do in terms of the daily rituals. So ghusl mas mayyit is wajib if you have touched a dead body which has become cold. One final note, I would like to thank the ISIJ for providing the ghusl room and the facility, and also the burial committee for coming forward and making this demonstration possible, having the patience to watch us. Transfer membership is there.
We'll be resuming in about 2 minutes. We'll just be resuming in 2 minutes.
You,
Brothers and sisters, welcome back. I'm going to ask everyone to take their seats. We got one small segment before we open it up to Q&A again. And then I believe Tabarruk is also going to be served during Q&A. So if I can get everyone to take their seats, please. So brothers and sisters, I hope that you found the ghusl and the kafan demonstration to be of value to you. I hope you were able to ask all of your questions to the volunteers who are providing the demonstration in itself. There's two items that I want to touch on briefly before we close off and move on to questions and answers. And the first item is actually the, Salatul Mayat is what I'd like to touch on. It's important that everybody understands the principles surrounding Salatul Mayat, and I'm going to ask the AV team to put the slides back up for me. Thank you. So when we talk about Salatul Mayat, you have to understand Salatul Mayat is a wajibat. However, given that it is a wajib salat, you need to understand that taharat is not a condition for this prayer. So this is one of the only prayers where taharat is actually not a requirement. You can quickly run in and pray. And the premise behind this is that even though it's referred to as Salatul Mayat, it is actually a set of du'as. Salatul Mayat is also recited in Jamaat form. However, each of us who are present behind the Imam have an obligation to recite Salatul Mayat ourselves. And if for whatever reason we are unable to recite Salatul Mayat, the 5 takbirat should be recited as a bare minimum. So everybody understands, and for everyone's benefit, Salatul Mayat consists of 5 takbirat. And after each of the takbirat, there is a short dua. So after the first takbir, we confirm that there is no God but Allah, and that Prophet Muhammad is his last and final messenger. After the second takbir, we recite salawat or praise in honor of the Holy Prophet and his progeny. After the third takbir, we turn to the Almighty Allah and we ask Him, or we seek forgiveness from Him for those who are present, those who are living, not those who are just necessarily in the room, but those who are living as well as those who have passed away. And then finally, we turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after the fourth takbir, and we seek forgiveness for the deceased. And when we are speaking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this prayer, we are saying, "O Allah, indeed this man or woman is your servant, is the son or the daughter of your servant, and the son or the daughter of your maidservant. He or she has come to you, and you are the best of hosts. O Allah, we know nothing about him or her except what is good, and you know more about him or her than we do. O Allah, if he or she was a doer of good, increase his or her good deeds, and if he or she was a sinner, forgive his or her sins, and gather him or her on the day of judgment with the Prophet and the purified Imams." And last but not least, the fifth takbir ends or closes off Salatul Mayat. So as you can see from Salatul Mayat, only the dua that's after the fourth takbir has anything to do with the deceased themselves. Talqeen, on the other hand, is something that is recited at the cemetery. And we recite the talqeen twice. We recite it, the first time we recite talqeen is when we've brought the janazah to the qabristan and we've just turned the janazah to face the direction of the qibla. The second time we recite talqeen is after the grave itself has been closed. Okay? So you may ask, what is this talqeen? Well, talqeen is essentially a dua or a supplication that contains the teachings of our Aqidah. For the gents who have been to the cemetery, I often say that these are the covenants of our faith, and we are reminding the deceased of the covenants of our faith. What I'm going to do for the benefit of the sisters, especially because you wouldn't have heard talqeen at the cemetery unless you've been there, I'm actually going to walk you through the Arabic as well as the translation of the talqeen as well. Sorry, bear with me for 30 seconds. So, here we go. I'm going to try this. So the talqeen starts. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Isma ifham, isma ifham, isma ifham. That translates to, I begin in the name of Allah, who is the most kind, the most gracious, the most merciful. Listen and understand. Listen and understand, listen and understand. And then what we'll do is we will take the name of the deceased. I'm going to ask the AV team just to advance the slide for me if you can, please. Thank you. And then we say, هل أنت على العهد الذي فارقتنا عليه من شهادتي أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأنا محمدا صلى الله عليه وآله عبده ورسوله. We say, listen and understand, and we take the individual's name. So in my case, O Kazim, son of Inayat. You are, and then we're asking, are you on the same covenant on which you were when you parted from us? That there is no God but Allah, who is the one and the only, who has no partner. And that indeed Muhammad, may the peace of Allah be upon him and his progeny, is the slave and the messenger of Allah, and that Ali is the commander of the faithful and the leader of all successors. We say, وَسَيِّدُ النَّبِيِّينَ وَخَاتَمُ الْمُرْسَلِينَ وَأَنَا عَلِيٌّ أَمِيرُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَسَيِّدُ الْوَسِيِّينَ وَإِمَامٌ افترض الله طاعته على العالمين وأن الحسن والحسين وعلي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والحجة القائم المهدي. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, if you can just go back one. I apologize. So we've recited the names of our 12 imams, and it serves as a reminder to the deceased as to who they are. And then we say, may the peace of Allah be on all of them. They are the imams of the believers and are the authorities of the world. And all of these imams are the right guides for the pious. Then we say, we take the individual's name. So again, using me as the example, O Kazim, son of Inayat, or Ya Kazim ibn Inayat, we turn around and we say, إذا أتاك الملكان المقربان رسولين من عند الله تبارك وتعالى وسألك عن ربك وعن نبيك وعن دينك وعن كتابك وعن قبلتك وعن أئمتك فلا تخف ولا تحزن وكل في جوابهما الله جل جلاله رب ومحمدا صلى الله عليه وآله نبيه. We turn around and we say, O Kazim, son of Inayat, when the two angels favored by Allah, appointed by him, approach you, praise be to Allah, blessed the exalted, and ask about your God and your Prophet, and your religion and your book, and your Qibla and your direction and your Imams. Don't be afraid or be grieved, but say in response, Allahu Jalla Jalaluhu Rabb wa Muhammadan sallallahu alayhi wa alihi nabi'i, wal Islamu dini, wal Qur'anu kitabi, والكعبة كبلتي وأمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب إمامي والحسن بن علي المجتبى إمامي والحسين بن علي الشهيد بكربلاء إمامي وعلي زين العابدين إمامي ومحمد الباكر علم النبيين إمامي وجعفر الصادق إمامي وموسى الكاظم إمامي وعلي الرضا إمامي ومحمد الجواد إمامي وعلي الهادي إمامي والحسن العسكري إمامي والحجة القائم المنتظر إمامي. We say, Allah is my Rabb, Muhammad, peace be upon him, is my prophet, Islam is my religion, and Quran is my book. The Kaaba is my direction, and then we take the names of the 12 purified Imams, and then we say, all these great persons, may Allah's peace be upon them, are my Imams, they are my leaders, my chiefs, and my intercessors. And I keep friends with them, and I have hatred for their enemies in this world, as well as the world to come. Then we say, هؤلاء صلوات الله عليهم أجمعين أئمتي وسادتي وقادتي وشفعائي بهم أتولى ومن أعدائهم أتبرأ في الدنيا والآخر ثم اعلم يا كاظم ابن عناية حسين أن الله تبارك وتعالى نعم الرب وأنا محمدا صلى الله عليه وآله نعم الرسول وأنا أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب وأولاده المعصومين الأئمة الاثنى عشر نعم الأئمة وأنا ما جاء به محمدا صلى الله عليه وآله حق وأن الموت حق وسؤال منكر ونكير في القبر حق والبعثاء حق ونشور حق وصراط حق والميزان حق وتطائر الكتب حق والجنة حق والنار حق وأن الساعة آتية لا ريب فيها وأن الله يبعث من في القبور. We say, thank you. We say that Allah the Almighty and the Exalted is the best of the Lords. We say that Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his progeny is our prophet, and that the commander of the faithful, Ali son of Abu Talib, and his offspring, the 12 Imams, are the best of the Imams. And that the message that Muhammad, peace be upon him, brought from Allah is true, that death is true, the questioning in the grave by Munkar and Nakir is true, that the resurrection of the dead is true, that the appearance before Allah is true, the path is true, the scale is true, and the accounting of the deeds is true. We then say, and the heaven is true, and the hell is true, and that there is no doubt about the coming inevitable hour of reckoning, and Allah will raise the dead from their graves. We then say, Afahimta, Ya Kazim ibn Inayat Hussein, ثبتك الله بقول الثابت وهداك الله إلى صراط مستقيم عرف الله بينك وبين أوليائك في مستقر من رحمته اللهم جاف الأرض عن جنبه وأسد به روحها إليك واللكيها منك برهانا اللهم أفوك أفوك. O Kazim, son of Inayat, may Allah keep you safe and guide you to the right path. May Allah acquaint you with the chosen ones in the vicinity of His mercy. Oh Allah, and then we turn to and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in dua, we say, Oh Allah, make the earth spacious for him or her on both sides of the grave, and elevate his or her soul towards you, and direct your guidance to him or her. Oh Allah, I seek your forgiveness. We say, Allahumma afwaka afwak. We say, Allah, we seek your forgiveness or your pardon. And this is something that is recited at the Qabristan twice. As I had said, once when the janazah is placed before the grave, when we turn the janazah the body to face the direction of the Qibla, and a second time it's recited. So when it's recited the first time, you think of it in the sense that when it's recited the very first time, you have the support of all of the community members there who are present, providing that instruction to the deceased, saying, look, we are here with you, we are all collectively reminding you of your faith. The second time that this is recited is when the janazah is placed in the grave and the grave is closed. Once the grave is closed, we have the recitation of Surah Fatiha. We ask all well-wishers to come forward and recite Surah Fatiha. And once that is done, we ask everybody to take 40 steps away from the grave. The reason we ask everyone to take the 40 steps away is because there is a hadith from the Prophet that says that when a mu'min or a mu'minah is 40 steps away from the grave, that the recitation or the discussion that's taking place between the alim and the deceased, or the sheikh and the deceased, cannot be heard by anybody. So we ask everyone to move 40 steps away, and then this exact same talqeen is recited, and that signifies that, look, now you are on your own. There's nobody here with you, there's nobody here to help you. So I'm now reminding you one-on-one. Okay, once the talqeen is recited, everybody departs from the cemetery. Those who wish to come back to the grave to recite Surah Fatiha or additional Quran are welcome to come back. But essentially at that point, everybody is leaving now. And you have to remember that the first night, we've been told that the first night in the grave is by far the most difficult time in the grave that anyone is going to face. That is their very first time being completely alone in their own final resting place. And so we humbly request that all mu'mineen take out sadaqah in honor of that deceased. Remember the deceased with the recitation of namaz hadiyah mayyat, and for the next of kin to recite namaz washat. One of the other things I want to briefly just touch on is the importance of attending a funeral. I know funerals happen at the snap of a finger. Not all of us have the ability to drop our work and just run off to the cemetery or to the mosque for it. But if you have the ability to do so, it is highly recommended that you do. Our 8th Imam, Imam Ali Rida alayhi salatu wassalam, has said, whoever so escorts a janazah of one of our own is forgiven. He or she becomes void of sins, just like a newly born child. And that just shows the importance that is placed on attending and taking part in funerals. Not only does it serve as a reminder to us of what is to come for us, we are there as a community for the grieving family as well, and we are there to build for our akhirat as well. And so one of the things that I would humbly request, if you ever have the ability and you see that there's been someone who's passed away, try to attend, whether it's at the mosque for Salatul Mayyit, or even if you try to come out to the Qabristan, it would be highly, highly recommended. Brothers and sisters, at this time I'm going to open it up for question and answer. And then tabarruk will be served, I want to say momentarily as well. So tabarruk will be served on both the ladies and the gents side momentarily while I take in Q&A. So if anybody has any questions, I would ask that you please raise your hands. Volunteers will come and bring the microphones to you. Before I just start taking questions from the live audience, there's a lot of questions that have come in online. I'm going to try to answer a couple of them first. So if you give me about 3-4 minutes so I can try to answer as many of the online ones, and then we'll come back to the in-person questions. So the first question that I have that came in is, what is the religious ruling regarding the burial of Quran or taweez or rings with the deceased? It is highly recommended that the Holy Quran that the deceased had, or any rings that the deceased wore, are passed down to the next generations of the deceased. If for whatever reason you have, say, a Quran that is in tatters, where pages are ripped or torn, and it is an absolute wish of the deceased that the Quran be buried, we bring that Quran with you to mosque with the coffin, and what we will do is we will wrap the Quran and we will place it on top of the coffin and we will bury it with the individual. Someone had asked, what are interment rights? So interment rights are the rights to bury. So when I said that the ISIJ holds interment rights at 5 cemeteries, we hold the rights to bury at the 5 cemeteries. So we have purchased X number of plots where we can bury. The next question is it up to each cemetery the question is, why are we not allowed to have double graves at Wadi Salam? And the answer is that each cemetery, based on their own ground conditions, site plan approval, regulatory approvals, etc., have the ability to bury either single or double. It's not something that we have a say in. It's something that's at the discretion of each and every cemetery. There's been a lot of questions that have come in with respect to the costs of burials. I've used the number of $10,000 in today's presentation as the average cost, okay? However, the number can really vary anywhere between $8,500 and I want to say about $12,000 to $13,000, depending on which cemetery has been selected. So I use the number 10,000 just as a simple, easy average number to work with. Somebody has asked, I would like to know, if a death has taken place at home and there is no death certificate, what do we do? So whenever someone passes away at home, either we will be given a document signed by a nurse that allows the release of the body, or there will be a death certificate issued by a coroner, or the third document that will be made available is a document that's referred to as a warrant to bury. Any of those 3 documents allow us to come and take the deceased from the home. Very rarely, in fact, I have yet to come across a case where they haven't left any one of these 3 papers at the home where the deceased passed away. So there's another question in here about, can ladies attend a funeral at the cemetery? Without getting into the nitty-gritty of it, the short answer is yes, ladies can attend. It's highly not recommended, but they can attend, okay? When you are at the cemetery, we would ask that you that you're standing further back. The gents will perform all of the last rites, and then we will invite the sisters to come to place Zamzam water on the grave and to recite their Fatiha and the like. Somebody asked, what is siyako? So, and that's a legitimate question. Siyako is essentially food or a meal that is served after the burial has taken place, and for the sisters it's served while the gents are at the burial. It is a very standard menu that we have here at the ISIJ of Toronto. It's a lentil curry with rice and bread, and then there's siro, which is essentially a sweet dish that's really provided to sweeten the mouth. The reason why we provide this meal service is, A, we know that people have not had the time to sit and eat a meal. In fact, when someone passes away, none of us have the appetite to even sit there and eat. The second reason is because there is a hadith from the Holy Prophet that says that a stove in a deceased home should not turn on for 3 days. And so this is the beginning of that. So we provide the meal here at the mosque, or you have the option to have it sent home to your house for the 3 days, or you can donate the cost, and that's entirely up to you. One of the questions that came up is, I am a member here, but my parents are not and they live abroad, but when they're visiting, if they pass away, what happens? Because they are your parents and you are a member here, you have a direct relationship with them, we will look after their burial and their ghusl, kafan, and burial. However, the next of kin will still be responsible for the associated costs. There's a few questions that have come about reserving graves. Here at the ISIJ of Toronto, we no longer permit the reservation of graves. So if your loved one passed away and is buried at any one of our cemeteries, and you want to try to reserve either the level above them or the level or the grave next to them, unfortunately, that is not permitted. And so it's always on a first come, first serve basis. And I'll do 2 more questions online, and then I'm going to open it up to questions on the floor. Sorry. Are cemeteries or portions of the cemetery owned by the Jamaat, and do we have full rights? The answer is no. The Jamaat or the ISIJ does not own any cemetery. We only own interment rights, or the right to bury at these cemeteries. Therefore we have no rights over the cemetery land, etc. And are there any fiqh-related issues regarding this? The answer is no. As far as we are aware, there are none. The only requirement we have to bury a Muslim is that the person should be buried in a Muslim cemetery or a section of a cemetery that is reserved for Muslims only. So you'll notice when we bury at Meadowvale or at Sandlak, it's a cemetery that has all faiths and denominations. However, the section that we have, section 20, for example, at Sandlak, is for us only. Okay? And I will open up the floor to questions on both the ladies and the gents side. Brothers, I see a couple hands going up. Yep.
So my question is regarding, you said the initial talqeen is recited, and then when the body gets placed into the grave, everyone takes 40 steps away, and then it's everyone except for the Sheikh, the Maulana, who then does the talqeen one-on-one with the body, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, correct. Yes.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum.
First talqeen, usually I saw the holding the puja like this.
Yes. Yes.
Everything is there, or to hold the crossway, or we can hold just like this also.
Sorry, you were cutting out there. So the question is?
In the first talqeen,
yes,
the deceased shoulder were hold cross by the cross hand.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when the first talqeen is being recited, the next of kin is holding the deceased, right hand on right shoulder, left hand on left shoulder. And when the deceased's name is called out, the next of kin is gently shaking the deceased, and it symbolizes that, look, we're talking to you. Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Guys, quick question. If the older son, for some reason, allows the younger son to do it for the father, is that okay?
Absolutely. That is the next of kin, or the eldest, giving up his right and his responsibility and passing it to the next person. Absolutely, that's allowed. Any questions on the sister's side? Sorry, there's a question here. I'm going to come right back to you.
I just wanted to follow up on the question that the brother asked about the right of the oldest son and the younger son.
Yes.
I'm not aware of this, but what if there's no male relative or...
Then if there is no male relative, so then that's fine. The next of kin can be the eldest daughter if there is a daughter, or in the event that the deceased has no children, it could be their sibling, whoever they've designated as the next of kin in that case. Any other questions on the sister's side? Okay, brothers?
The holding of the shoulders, as the brother was mentioning, that happens inside the grave or outside of the grave?
So here it happens outside the grave, because here we do not bury the body directly in the grave. It goes inside the coffin, and the coffin is what gets lowered. So the first talqeen where you're holding the deceased happens outside of the grave.
And then, okay, the second one is as it is covered.
Pardon me?
Right? The second one, the grave is covered.
The second one, the
Yeah,
grave is
yeah.
closed, yes.
Thank you.
It's come up a few times now, but is there anything that actually makes a graveyard a Muslim graveyard as opposed to just a simple section? Or is it
Sorry,
just-
what makes, you cut out there, what makes, a bit closer.
Is there anything that's done that actually makes a graveyard a Muslim graveyard, or is it as long as it's all Muslims who are buried there, then it's classified as a Muslim graveyard?
So that is something that I would actually have to look into to see if there's any sort of a dua or a supplication that's recited. As far as I'm aware, there is none. It is simply a dedicated section for Muslims, but I can look into that and get back to you. Sisters, there's a question on this side here. Well, the mic is coming. One of the questions that I did get online and that was also asked during the Ghusl Kafan demonstration here is, in the event a person's husband passes away, can the sister or his wife come in and perform Ghusl? And the answer is only in the event when there's nobody else around to perform the Ghusl can the wife come in and perform it. Otherwise, it is going to be done by men. And alhamdulillah, here we are blessed to have enough male volunteers and female volunteers to undertake the rights and the responsibilities. I'll turn it over to you for your question.
Assalamu alaikum. So
Alaikum
can you buy a plot, even if it's first come, first serve, can you buy the plot, let's just say for your parents, or no?
At one of the 5 cemeteries
Yeah.
that we have? No, the answer is no, you cannot. So those plots or the rights to those plots have already been purchased by the ISIJ. We are not going to be selling those rights to anybody, so the answer is no, you cannot. Which also answers the question, can we reserve any graves for our loved ones? And the answer is no, there's no reservation either. However, if you decided to go and buy a plot at another cemetery, like the TMC, for example, the Toronto Muslim Cemetery, you're welcome to go ahead and do that. In the event that your loved one passes away and they're a member of the ISIJ, we will still undertake their ghusl, kafan, and burial and look after the opening and the closing cost of the grave, but we would not reimburse for the cost of the grave itself.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
We have a question on the ladies' side for how long the marhum can hear for when they're being shaken.
That is a good question. I don't have an answer to that. I will look to Mubarak Bhai if you have. How long can the deceased hear? For example, when we're reciting talqeen, what is the time period in which they can hear? I know that their soul is still around. I don't know for how long it's around.
No idea. We'll have to find out.
We can find out for you, though. One second. I'm going to do a couple more from the ladies, and then we'll... No? Okay, go ahead.
Another question from me. If a family member is buried in the lower level, in a double grave,
yes,
and then there's another family member who passed away, can the second death not be in the same grave?
So, there's a short and a long answer to this. The short answer is yes. The long answer is, if all of the lower level of the cemetery has already been used up, then we will continue using each grave on a first come, first served basis. So we'll follow it in a sequential order. However, chances of 600 graves being filled up, unless there's a calamity of sorts, we will offer the option to the next of kin. So you'll see there's many at Sanlak, for example, where husband and wife have been buried on top of each other, or mother and daughter, and that's because we still have, we haven't used the lower level, so we always ask the next of kin, would you like so-and-so to be buried on top? And it's up to them to make that decision.
So you mentioned that you have to use a casket because that's by law.
Yes.
So are you allowed to fill sand within the casket, or is it just
No,
like
we do.
empty?
We
You do.
absolutely do. So first and foremost, we have to use a casket by law. We are in a jurisdiction right now that does not permit us to bury the body straight into the ground. So we use the most simplest of caskets, which is 6 pieces of plywood screwed together. One of the things that we do when we turn the body to face the direction of the Qibla in the casket is we take earth and we make a pillow around the head. So the head is resting on a pillow of earth. We would ask the next of kin to take some earth and rub it on the right cheek of the deceased, and we'll put some earth around the mid part of the body, just so it prevents the body from sliding back down, so it keeps it up in place. But we do put earth inside the casket, yes. Any other questions?
One more question here. Asking on behalf of someone, can non-members hire Jaffari funeral services or reserve them in the case of death, or do they have to pay the membership?
So the answer is they have to be a member for the ISIJ or Jaffari Funeral Services to take on the responsibilities of ghusl, kafan, and burial. There are only certain circumstances or conditions in which we will perform ghusl, kafan, and burial, which I had outlined earlier in my presentation. Which will also take me to my next question, and I'm going to just tie it together before I come to you, sister, is what if my loved one put in their will that they want to be looked after by the ISIJ of Toronto, but they were not a member? Unfortunately, that is a portion of the will that we cannot uphold, so you cannot put something in your will that creates a responsibility on another body, person, organization, unless you have some sort of a connection there, like there's a contractual connection, and i.e. membership is a contractual connection between the deceased, so it can go in your will. Anything else that's put in a will, for example, cannot be upheld by us just because they're not a member. Go ahead, sister.
I'm not sure about the laws, regulations of this country or Ontario, but can you repurpose a grave that has been filled twice, but it has been over 25, 30 years? Is that permissible?
So yes, repurposing of graves is something that does happen within the province. We have not repurposed any of our graves to the best of my knowledge. I have to go back and look at what the timeline would be. It's definitely not 25 or 30 years. It would be closer to anywhere between, I want to say, 75 to 100 years before we even get to that state. But there are not only rules, regulatory rules, but there's also rules from a Sharia perspective that would have to be followed if that was to happen. Or even moving of a grave because a city's taking over a piece of land or something like that. There are very strict rules and regulations around that, both from a regulatory as well as a Sharia perspective.
I know you touched on this a little bit, but we have a question regarding in which cases that spouses can perform ghusl on each other.
So the general rule of thumb is when there is nobody else around or available to perform the ghusl and kafan, okay? Here, as I had mentioned earlier, here we are blessed. We have enough volunteers, both on the ladies and the gent side, where we can have ghusl being performed by the same sex as the deceased. And so that is the general rule of thumb.
Other question. It has been said that there's a lot of spaces being filled up at Wadi as-Salam. So what's the protocol once the cemetery is at capacity?
Once Wadi as-Salam is at capacity, it's at capacity. There's nothing we can do about it. We have, in that case, 4 other cemeteries that can be used. I can tell you that our board of directors does undertake an actuarial study every so often to look at the pace at which people are passing away versus the cost and how we can work to replenish the number of graves that we have. But once the cemetery is filled up, there's nothing we can do at that point. Any questions? Any further questions? There's one here on the sister's side. Anyone on the gent side as well? Go ahead. Alaikum salam.
I just want to find out, Senlak I know has the double-decker burial. Is that for the whole plot?
No. So double graves only started at York Cemetery, which is Sandlac. I want to say the year 2000. So anything 2000, anybody who passed away year 2000 above, generally those are doubles, but we would double check to see what had taken place. Like I don't recall the actual cutoff, but we do have records of it.
And what about the other 4?
So Meadowvale Cemetery has doubles, which is right from inception, and we've only done 3 or 4 burials there to date. All of the other cemeteries are single level graves.
Okay, and how far down, like if you, the double decker, how far do you go for the first one?
8 to 9 feet.
And
Is it 9 feet? 9 feet.
And then you have like a barrier?
There'll be a barrier of earth and then the next grave. We try to bury each deceased anywhere between 5 to 6 feet below the earth. That's the general rule. From a Sharia perspective, you are to bury the deceased so that animals cannot get to or dig out and get to the body itself.
Okay, and because as you mentioned that first come first, so if a woman is buried and first come first, then another woman has to be, or
No.
does it matter?
No, it does not matter. From a Sharia perspective, we can bury anybody on top. Doesn't have to be of the same sex, nor does it have to be mahram to the person that's passed away.
I see. Okay, thank you.
We have one more question.
Go ahead.
Is the husband or wife able to hold or hug their partner before the burial?
Absolutely. So you must understand that once ghusl and kafan has been performed, the janazah is pak. A loved one, an immediate family member can hug them, can give them a kiss if that's what they wish. There's nothing that we will do to stop that or prevent that. There's nothing from a Sharia perspective that prevents that either. And once they've touched the body, there is no need for ghusl masse mayyit either because the body was already pak. I'm going to take a couple more questions from online and try to answer them, and then I'm going to close off with a short dua, inshallah. So, questions are, does siyako have to be a simple meal like dal and rice, or do we have a choice? The answer is you don't have a choice. Under the burial assistance plan, I know I joke with my wife all the time that I'd like it to be a nice steak meal so everyone remembers me, but it'll come out of my wife's pocket at that point. It is a simple meal that's under the burial assistance plan. Someone has said about the high costs of funeral services. What is the cost? What is the cause of the high costs? Costs are relative everywhere you go. It varies on the piece of land that you're being buried on, the location of the cemetery. We have operating costs here as well that get factored into all of the numbers. So it varies center to center, country to country, city to city in terms of what those costs are going to be. And I'll do one more question or one or two online. There was one about autopsies, and I want to touch on that again. So autopsies, if they have to be done, they're being done at the request of a regulatory body, okay? The coroner has suspected that it's a suspicious death, and therefore they will want to do an autopsy. The other time an autopsy is done is when the next of kin requests an autopsy to be done to determine the actual cause of death. We always speak to the next of kin. We always ask that an autopsy be avoided. We will work with the coroner and remind them of our religious aspects as well to ensure that they do the least invasive method. So in most cases, they're able to do a blood test and determine a cause of death or get close to a cause of death, and that's what we will recommend. Anytime that they have to cut open the body, we always ask them to avoid it unless that it is absolutely necessary to do. Now you have to understand that there's a regulatory component to this, or the law of the land, that we cannot contravene. So we have to allow them to do what they need to do. But I have to say, in most cases, they've cooperated with us. They've been very flexible with us to the point where when a body goes to the coroner, to the Center for Forensics, in some cases, it doesn't get released for 3, 4, 5 days. And I can tell you, based on experience, we have been very successful in having the bodies released the same day, if not the next day. So again, that's all based on relationships. But again, we try to avoid having an autopsy. And yes, we will intervene. As JFS, we will intervene on the next of kin's behalf with the coroner, etc. I think if there's no more questions in-house, I think this is where I'm going to end off. We are at the top of the hour. I ask that you please join me in praying that we all be granted a long, healthy life, that we pray that we continue to be guided on the path of our A'immah, that we pray for the reappearance of our 12th Imam Ajanallahu Ta'ala Farajuh Sharif, and that we all be given the opportunity to see our loved ones off and be able to perform the last rites of our loved ones. And last but not least, please join me in praying for those who are ill. We pray for their shifa and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant them speedy recovery. And those who are ill or facing hardships due to any reason, we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ease in their hardships. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahu samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Sadaqallahu al-aliyyul azim.
Thank you so much, Kazim Uncle. I'd like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to the JFS committee and, of course, all the volunteers for all their help today. Thank you all for coming out and attending our Janazah Journey event. We hope it was informative and we all learned about the burial process. Can we please get a loud salawat for all the volunteers and organizers who work tirelessly behind the scenes every day? We are forever indebted to you all and pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues to give you the strength to serve the community. If you guys would like to get more information on the burial process, and I believe an FAQ will be posted, please follow the JFS committee on jaffari.org/funeral on their website. And for all our upcoming programs and events, please follow us on Instagram at Jaffari Youth. Can I please invite Brother Ali Jivraj to please grace us with a closing dua and ziyarat? Can we get one more loud salawat, please?
There is an additional request to recite Dua Shifa Marid for those who are sick and in difficulty. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. أَمَّا يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ 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 أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا نبي الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدتي نساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا خديجة الكبرى أم المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، السلام عليك يا علي بن الحسين زين العابدين، ومحمد بن علي باقر علم النبيين، وجعفر بن محمد الصادق، وموسى بن جعفر الكاظم، وعلي بن موسى الرضا، ومحمد بن علي الجواد، وعلي بن محمد الهادي، والحسن بن علي الزكي العسكري. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا صاحب العصر والزمان، الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن وكعبة الإيمان وإمامنا وإمام الإنس والجان. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك، واجعلنا من أنصارك وأعوانك والمستشهدين بين يديك. السلام عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.